Hello, I'm Robert Williams. Today I want to talk to you about the strange death of Dr. David Kelly. His untimely death caused a major controversy in British politics, and the mystery continues today. It's really a tale of dodgy dossiers and the history of the Iraq War and the claims made by the British government that Saddam Hussein possessed weapons of mass destruction, WMD. The main figures, the main cast of characters in this story are Dr. Kelly himself, who was a government advisor on biological weapons, two BBC journalists, Andrew Gilligan and Susan Watts, the Prime Minister, Tony Blair, and his Director of Communications, Alastair Campbell, and Lord Hutton, who was asked to lead an inquiry into the circumstances of Dr. Kelly's death. And we'll also have something to say about a woman called Mai Pedersen, who was an American spy and linguist who was close to Dr. Kelly. When the weapons of mass destruction were not found, a number of journalists started to ask questions about the quality of the British government's intelligence, and in particular the dossier they produced called Iraq's WMD, the assessment of the British government. Gilligan and Watts, the two journalists, separately sought interviews with Dr. Kelly. Gilligan later made a broadcast on the BBC Today radio programme early in the morning, just after 6 a.m, in which he made the claim that the British government had somehow sexed up, to use his phrase, or otherwise invented or exaggerated the evidence they possessed that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction. The reaction to this broadcast from the government was extreme, and in particular, Alastair Campbell, the government's Director of Communications, went ballistic and demanded retractions, demanded that the BBC apologise, the journalists be sacked, and so forth. Now, Kelly's interviews with Gilligan and Watts were off the record. That is to say, they could take note of what he said, but they were not supposed to name him as their source. But the search went on in government to find the source of these comments, and the finger was pointed at Dr. Kelly. Indeed, Dr. Kelly himself went to his employers and said he had spoken to these journalists. But in any event, the government then had to decide what to do. And it decided that it would not reveal Dr. Kelly's name, but rather it would allow journalists to guess his name. And the important distinction the government wished to draw was to say that the person who said this was not a member of the intelligence community. That is to say, he was not a member of the body that had written the dodgy dossier or approved the dodgy dossier. In any event, the journalists quickly guessed what was happening. Kelly was given 10 minutes to leave his home and go into hiding, and eventually parliamentary hearings were held into what had happened, and Dr. Kelly was one of the witnesses. And he appeared before Parliament and gave a very uneasy performance, a very embarrassed performance. And a number of MPs were very hostile towards him. Dr. Kelly went home, and then a few days later he told his wife he was going out for a walk, and he never came back. And the next day his body was found in some woods near his home in Oxfordshire. And the general view was that he had committed suicide. But a number of people and a number of conspiracy theorists have been unhappy about this conclusion. Dr. Kelly's last emails wrote of the many dark actors playing games. But who was he talking about? The British government, MI5, CIA, or exiled Iraqis?